think electronics governs our lives, certainly in this industry. And we had a little computer glitch a while ago talking about the state of Maine and its electoral count.
Yes, Catherine, let me explain an interesting variation in the way some of the states count their electoral votes. There are two states, Maine and Nebraska, that divide their electoral vote count by congressional district. Every congressional district gets one electoral vote, and if you carry the state of Maine, you get an additional 2 electoral votes. Maine has a total of 2 congressional districts. That gives it 4 electoral votes. Now, Maine, the whole state, was won by Bill Clinton, and earlier we awarded all 4 Maine electoral votes to Governor Clinton, to the Democrats. But in fact, one of the 2 congressional districts in Maine is now too close to call. It's a very close race up there between Ross Perot and Bill Clinton. So we can only award 3 of Maine's 4 electoral votes to Governor Clinton, 2 because he carried the state, and 1 because he carried 1 of Maine's congressional districts. The other one must be left undecided. It could go to Ross Perot or Bill Clinton. Indeed, it could be Ross Perot's first electoral vote of the evening. So therefore, our current electoral vote count is 238 votes for Clinton, 46 for George Bush.
I can't resist this. This could mean that one elector going to Ross Perot, he'd be the $60 million elector, right?
Right.
South Carolina Democrat Ernest Fritz Hollings won the right to go back to Washington. He's a happy man. Some of his critics have called him a very stubborn man, and he doesn't care generally what you think about him. Let's go down to Columbia, South Carolina. He's standing right behind this man who's prepared to introduce him.
Fritz Hollings.
Yes, Fritz
Hollings has a marvelous Charleston accent. Ted Kennedy, fellow senator, once said he's the only non-English speaker in the Senate.
What we've noticed tonight is a lot of these Southern Democratic Senate seats are up for grabs. Well, this is a class of Southern Democratic senators that have swung back and forth over the years. In 1980, the South lost a lot of these Senate seats to the Republicans. In 1986, 6 years ago, a lot of those Senate seats went back to the Democrats. And tonight, the Democrats are fighting to hold on to them. They've held on to South Carolina. As we can see, Fritz Hollings has been reelected. We'll see what happens in North Carolina and others.
Earlier this evening, I turned on that TV over there at WIS, and they had Houghton at 52, Hollings 48, and I hadn't made a concession speech recently, and the best I could think of is the people of South Carolina finally made me an outsider. Then I remember the Virginia game with our good team, Clemson, come back, and only 50% of this game, the first half, has been played. Is that right?
That's right.
Tommy hadn't conceded yet. Has he, Governor?
No, it takes him 2 days.
Huh?
It takes him 2 days.
Takes him 2 days to get. He got to wait for Washington to tell him.
That's right. There's no more Washington now. Who's going to tell him?
That's right. Well, your heart goes out on an occasion of this to you, right here. There's no question about it. All the friends all over the state, Tom Mulliken got them organized. We got somebody in every precinct. I can see them even with these bright lights in my eyes, and they're the ones that spread the word that went against this onslaught. The onslaught in this state obviously has been very, very difficult. And I want everybody to understand it. We saw this a couple of years ago, even more than that, because our state has been Republican and been in the Republican ranks, still in the Republican ranks. The rest of the country's sweeping Clinton into national office. That's their reason.
Well, let's go now to the east and our man Frank Sesno.
Thanks, Bernie. Well, what we're trying to do in the East is give you a sense not only of what's happening with some of the individual races, but what is happening with some of the trends, and they're interesting and they explain a lot. Let us start, though, with a gubernatorial race in the state of Rhode Island, where the Democratic incumbent, Bruce Sutherland, is beating ahead of Elizabeth Leonard. A Democratic incumbent, he was in trouble because of the state's credit and SNL's problems. He apparently has pulled it out. Now we go, though, and we looked into some of the exit polling. Across New England, the economy has been the principal issue, of course. And we were looking at how some of the voters who came out of the ballot and ballot boxes, voting places, were casting their votes. In New Hampshire, for example, which went for Bill Clinton, first time for a Democrat since 1964, 44% of the voters in the state of New Hampshire said the economy was poor. Of that 44% who said the economy was poor, nearly 3/4 of them cast their votes for Bill Clinton. It explains a lot, and we see it in Connecticut and Vermont and Maine, across the states in New England. It explains why the Republicans have lost their traditional edge there. Looking over to the New Hampshire governor race, however, it also shows that New Englanders are still capable of splitting their ticket, because Steve Merrill leads Arnie Arneson, the Democrat, at this current time. And we move on to some House races now. In Pennsylvania, Peter Kosmaier, the Democrat, the incumbent, appears to be in trouble. Not the least of his problems, 50 bounce checks. On to Maine, the 2nd district there. Olympia Snowe, the incumbent, may also be in trouble behind Pat McGowan. And off to Massachusetts, where Nick Mavroulis sits under a 17-count indictment. He seems to be in some trouble against Peter Kosmaier, the Democrat, the incumbent, appears to be in trouble. Not the least of his problems, 50 bounce checks. On to Maine, the 2nd district there. Olympia Snowe, the incumbent, may also be in trouble behind Pat McGowan. And off to Massachusetts, where Nick Mavroulis sits under a 17-count indictment. He seems to be in some trouble against Peter Torkelson. Off to Vermont now, where the governor's race has been decided. Governor Howard Dean, a physician, winning that race. And not surprisingly, just a few minutes ago, he had some comments on the issue of health care.
We have an administration in Washington for the first time in 12 years that's going to be interested in health care.
At this current time. And we move on to some House races now. In Pennsylvania, Peter Kosmaier, the Democrat, the incumbent, appears to be in trouble. Not the least of his problems, 50 bounce checks. On to Maine, the 2nd district there. Olympia Snowe, the incumbent, may also be in trouble behind Pat McGowan. And off to Massachusetts, where Nick Mavroulis sits under a 17-count indictment. He seems to be in some trouble against Peter Torkelson. Off to Vermont now, where the governor's race has been decided. Governor Howard Dean, a physician, winning that race. And not surprisingly, just a few minutes ago, he had some comments on the issue of health care.
We have an administration in Washington for the first time in 12 years that's going to be interested in health care. The fight for decent health care for everybody in the United States of America is not over. It starts tonight, and I can't tell you how proud I am of all of you who have put Vermont in the lead of the United States of America in guaranteeing universal health care for every man, woman, and child.
On the governor's mind in the state of Vermont. Over in the state of Pennsylvania, we took a look at some of the exit polls to see how health care was playing there. It is playing quite big, and it is playing for Governor Clinton. And now let's go back to the national desk.